Hi students, let's study the third part of this lesson. I believe the books will never disappear. In fact, the lesson is not so long one, but I think I took some more time to explain the different concepts. Just to have a brush up of the memory, we began with the first book read by George Borges, that is Grimm's fairy tale. Then we went about George Lewis' ideas about his mother, or what he thinks about his mother, that she was an extraordinary woman, a woman with grace who had no enemies, and he was feeling guilty that he had not paid enough respect and attention to her when she was alive. Then we went about very important aspect, that is George Borges thinking about his own blindness. He considers his blindness as a gift, as a resource. And he tells us not only that, any humiliation that happens in our life, misfortunes or embarrassments in our life, must be considered as a resource, as a blessing for the life to continue. A very important aspect, and from which many of us need to understand many things. Then he was quoting to justify or substantiate his ideas. He was quoting about Homer's epic poem, that is Odyssey. Then he was also quoting German poet Goethe, his Alles nice, very well quotation, that all that ends well. Okay. Then we went about his ideas about books, where he quotes or he gives a reference to the Library of Alexandria. Okay, and what he speaks about the books, then relevance of books, and how a book is written by the Spirit. And every book that is written by a Spirit is worth rereading, he says. Then another important aspect that we studied was about his concept on poetry and the poetic act, the aesthetic act. What he says there is that when a poet writes and the reader reads, there is always a difference, there is always a change. There's always a change in the idea, not the idea, but the way it is understood. If it doesn't take, he says, if such a thing doesn't take place, then the poet has failed, which he terms it as the poetic act. Okay, then he also spoke about using exact words in poetry. If those precise words or exact words are not used, then poetry doesn't become so effective one. Okay, now we go to the almost the final aspect of his discussion, and that is, okay, Roberto Alifano asks him a question. And what is the question he asks him? Well, he asks him the question that you have said that metaphors exist from our very beginnings. Could you expound on the concept Borges? Uh, to understand the metaphors, we have got different figures of speech in our language. And without the figure of speech, there is no language. And what is the function of the figure of a speech or figures of speech? They decorate the language. They embellish the language. They make the language very rich. They make the language very attractive. In fact, they make the language very effective. When you use any figure of speech, then the language becomes very effective. And you are able to convey more things with the help of these figures of speech. It can be simile, it can be metaphor, it can be personification. In fact, one metaphor, one personification, one simile, it can speak in volumes about a particular thing. Now, to understand metaphor, we should know what is a simile as well. Just to give you in brief, that simile where we compare two things. Remember, in simile, we compare two things basically. And the requirement is, when we compare these two things, between these two things, there should be one thing common. Otherwise, we cannot compare. What I mean to say is, for example, when I say he looks like a stone. Now see, what is the common between stone and him, a person? It cannot be. That comparison doesn't look nice. He looks like a god, or he looks like a goddess, or she looks like a goddess. Maybe very beautiful or attractive to look at, or whatever it is, there is something common. We say, okay, the water looked like petrol, or petrol looked like water. Now there is something common, at least that liquid aspect of it's common, or the color, appearance, at least if not color, the appearance is something looks like water, then there is a simile. So we always compare one thing with the other. Okay, the rope looked like a snake. Okay, because the shape of the rope and the shape of the snake both look alike. So we say the rope looked like a snake. See, simile is possible, the comparison is possible. One thing you must remember, we always mistake, the words used to compare are like or as. Now remember, this like, when it is used as a verb, if it comes in a sentence, it doesn't become simile. For example, I like ice cream. You cannot say it is a simile because there is like. Like is used as a verb there. Like should be used to compare. Compare, then it is fine. Then it becomes a simile. Okay. Now when we compare two things, and one thing should be common between the two. Okay. He looks like Sachin Tendulkar. Maybe the facial expression or way they play. Then there is a comparison. There is simile possible. Now what is metaphor? Metaphor is an implied simile. Please understand. Metaphor is an implied simile. What do you mean by implied simile? In metaphor, the simile is hidden. In metaphor, the simile is hidden. What do we do in simile? We compare one thing with another. But in the process, both things remain aloof. Both things remain separate. They don't become one. They don't become one. When I say Ganesh looks like Ramesh, Ganesh is separate, Ramesh is separate. Ganesh remains as Ganesh and Ramesh remains as Ramesh. But in metaphor, one thing becomes the other. One thing becomes the other. For example, imagine I have a student who is very, very intelligent. Very, very intelligent, very, very wise. So the whole class may call him, well, he is like Einstein. He is like Einstein. See, that is a simile. He is like Einstein. He is not Einstein. But the same thing, when I use it or express in a metaphor, I say he is the Einstein of the class, or he is an Einstein in the class. What do I mean? Here we have removed that student and we see Einstein in him. In the sense, one thing becomes the other. For us, for the whole class, he is Einstein. Let's take another example. Imagine you have your friend, let's call him as Vijay, and he plays cricket very well, very good cricket player, very sound, and he plays exactly like Sachin Tendulkar. So in simile we say Vijay plays cricket like Sachin Tendulkar. Simile, Vijay is Vijay, Sachin is Sachin, but we compare. But sometimes we say in our school, he is Sachin Tendulkar. That's a metaphor. In our school, he is Sachin Tendulkar. In the sense, see, for us, for the whole school, Vijay becomes Sachin Tendulkar. We see Sachin Tendulkar in him. See the language, how it can be used and how effective it becomes. When I say simile, he is like Sachin Tendulkar, well, we don't pay much respect to Vijay. But when we say, Vijay, you are the Sachin Tendulkar of this class or of this school, then Vijay's prestige, Vijay's standard goes higher. We have not made Sachin Tendulkar less respectful, but we have made Vijay more respectful. We have identified, we have recognized his talent, and that is the beauty of metaphor. Okay, now let us understand only that much and come to Jeorge Borges, what he speaks about. Alifano asks him a question, and what is the question Alifano asks him? The question is, well, you have said that metaphors exist from our very beginnings. From our very beginning, yeah. Could you expound on that concept, Borges? So Alifano asks him a question, can you tell us more about the metaphors which exist? See, simile, we create a simile, but usually the metaphors exist. What is that? He says, yes, certainly. I believe that metaphors, if they are truly metaphors, exist from the beginning of time. But we express them differently. I have occasionally thought of reducing all metaphors to 5 or 6, which seem to me to be the essential metaphors. These things can be spoken only by an expert literary person. And Jeorge Borges belongs to that category. That's why he says there are so many metaphors existing in this world, and they are there from the beginning of the time, from the beginning. And Jeorge Borges says, I can reduce them, all the metaphors, and reduce them to 4 or 5. Which are those? What are those metaphors? Alifano asking. And he says, well, time and river. Time and river. Look at here the slide. It says, time is like a river. Remember? Time is like a river. This is not a metaphor, but this is a simile. But the metaphor expression will be time is river or river is time. What may be the reason time and river are compared? Maybe time flows, river flows. They don't stop. And if they stop, they are not time. It's not river. If the water doesn't flow, it is not river. That's why I think Heraclitus and Parmenides, these are two famous philosophers. Parmenides is a philosopher who said, everything is permanent in this world. Nothing changes. There is no change, he said. But Heraclitus said, change is the rule of the nature. There is change. And he says, you cannot step into the same river twice. I repeat, you cannot step into the same river twice. Why? Imagine now at 9 o'clock I go and get into the waters, a river. I wash myself or have bath and come out. Tomorrow I go back and again I get into the river, but it is not the same river. The name is the same. Name of the river may be the same. Kali river, Ganga river, Yamuna, same river. The name is the same, but the waters have flown, which means there's a different river because the water flows. Similarly, the time, today 9 o'clock, when I come tomorrow, time that 9 is the same, but times have changed. Every minute there is a change. That's why he says time and river, well, it is a metaphor. Next one, life and dreams. Life and dreams. Okay, what is that? Look at the slide here. My life is not a dream. My dreams are my life. You see, life and dreams both are considered as one. How it is possible? Maybe you yourself can find out how my life can become a dream and my dream can become a life. See, we have got many dreams in our life and we spend our life to achieve those dreams. Then, similarly, we have many dreams or we dream many dreams which we want to achieve in our life. See, life and dream. The third one he speaks about is death and sleep. Death and sleep. Remember here, sleep and death, who are twin brothers. Life, death and sleep. What is that? Usually I say like this. What is death and what is sleep? You see, sleep is a temporary death and death is a permanent sleep. Again I repeat, sleep is a temporary death because sometimes we sleep or we fall asleep so much, like even somebody takes us, lifts us and takes us somewhere, we are not aware. Even if earthquake takes place, we are not aware because that deep we go to sleep. It's like as if the person is dead. That's why it is said sleep and death. And death, well, a dead person we say he is gone to sleep or he is gone to sleep in the Lord. You see, it is a permanent sleep and a temporary death. Next one, stars and eyes. What is the comparison between star and the eyes? Maybe stars shine. Similarly, our eyes also shine. Stars shine. Similarly, our eyes also shine. So, and there is a light. There is a light. So, I think they are compared together. Or on the face, the eyes look like the star. They always, our eyes should, eyes never tell lies, they say. Eyes never tell lies. The eyes, they are like the stars. They tell everything. And the confidence of a person, the hope of the person, the conviction of a person is always seen in his eyes. And the last one, quite interesting one, flowers and women. Flowers and women. What may be the reason both are compared? Maybe the aspect of beauty is considered here. Aspect of beauty. As women are, as flower, they are very attractive to look at. Similarly, the women, of course, even men are attractive to look at. and men are also handsome, women are also beautiful. Maybe negatively, if I say, like, the beauty, like the flowers, they say flowers, they bloom in the morning and they wither in the evening. Similarly, the beauty, well, it is not permanent. They say beauty is skin deep. Beauty is skin deep. If you take away the skin, well, that's the end of the skin. Then the flesh is seen. Similarly, beauty is skin deep. Put a mark and the beauty is gone. Like a flower lives for one day. Similarly, the beauty in a person, it stands, or rather physical beauty or external beauty is short-lived. It is not forever. But of course, that is not the aspect compared here. Maybe the concept of beauty is compared here. Women are compared to flowers, rose, or flowers are compared to women. Lily, beautiful flower, is always compared to cleanliness or the value of purity. Okay, so these are the different metaphors that Jeorge Borges speaks about. These would be, I believe, the essential metaphors that are found in all literature. And George Alifano says these are found in all literature, not only in English literature. Then he says, and then there are others that are whimsical. I believe that the poet's task is to discover metaphors, even though they may already exist. Very beautifully he has said, a poet's task is to discover metaphors. That metaphor, as I said, it cannot be simple, it cannot be whimsical. You can't create a metaphor. There should be foundation for that. For example, when he says flowers and women, well, people should accept it. Yeah, that is true. When he says time and river, well, people should accept it. That is true. I simply can't create one metaphor. Just because I use it, I can't create one metaphor. So remember this. These days we find, many YouTubers. What do you mean by YouTube? Everybody opens a channel and does something. And because people read it, you can't call him a YouTuber. There should be something, valuable, something tangible, something concrete to speak to. Then it is fine. Just because I can do it, everybody becomes a YouTuber. Metaphors are not like that. Jeorge Borges says, well, a poet's job is to find out the real metaphors in life. Okay, let's go ahead. Borges, there are people who speak of the disappearance of the books, and they assert that modern developments in communication will replace them with something more dynamic that will require less time than reading. What do you think of that? This is a very, very important question, and I'm sure when you read this, students must be feeling very happy that the books will disappear. See, when we go to the school, what is the biggest problem that we have got? Is to carry a big bag on our back filled with books. For each subject, one textbook and one notebook, one workbook and essay book and a dictation book, drawing book, atlas and a test book. Hundreds of books we need to carry. May not be when you come to the PUC, but until high school, we always did that. And if a book was not brought, then we were imposed, or imposition was given to us. Sometimes punishment was given to us. Well, I'm not speaking about notebooks. Here, the reference is to the books on different topics. So Alifano asks him a question. Well, the modern developments, and it makes us to think that books will disappear. In fact, they have disappeared. What is your opinion about that? Well, we should know whether the books have disappeared. It looks like that, As I said earlier, all of us went to the books. For any reference, we went to the books. Today, we go to Google. Any concept, suddenly we go to the Google. We Google it out. We surf and we find out the notion. Which means we need not have a book with us. Which is enough that we have a mobile with the internet connection, or we have a laptop or a computer, and we are able to see. And you see, things or the knowledge is stored, they say, in the clouds. Okay. Those who know computer, they will understand. The knowledge is stored. Okay. The knowledge is stored in the Google stores it. There are search engines. They search and they come and they give us the knowledge. We don't need to have books. We don't need to have paper. And in fact, it is justified that for the books you require paper, and for paper you require forest. You require the pulp of the wood to prepare paper, which means destruction of the nature. So it is good that things are like that done. So what do you say about this? The modern developments or communication replace them. So do you agree? We saw earlier everything was in the form of books. Okay, poems were written and kept in the books. Everything was in the form of books. In fact, our photographs were in albums. We can call them as books. But today, everything we save it in the computer, soft mode, not in the hard copy, but in the soft copy. In fact, all the government offices, they say no use of paper, no use of paper, or less use of paper. So what is your idea about this? Very interesting what he replies. He says, I believe that books will never disappear. The title of the lesson. You see, I believe that books will never disappear. See how convincingly this man speaks about that books will never disappear. It is impossible that it will happen. It is impossible that will happen. Among the many inventions of man, the book, without a doubt, is the most astounding. Remember, this question is almost every year there is a question on this. Which is the most astounding, most fantastic invention of man? Well, it is not computer or anything. He says it is book. Book is the most astounding invention of man. All the others are extension of our body. Understand this? He says book is the most astounding invention, and he says all the other inventions are the extension of human body. Some examples he gives there. First, the telephone. You find here the telephone. What is that? He says the telephone, for example, is the extension of our voice. For example, my parents who are in Mangalore, I make a phone call, and I talk to them, and I am able to hear that voice in my mobile sitting here. Or my friend who is in America, States, from there he would make a call and I am able to hear. So what is that? The phone that I have got in my hand. Phone, phono, sound. Okay, you know this. So it becomes the extension of the voice. So whose voice it is? My voice would reach to him and his voice would reach to me. So this phone becomes an extension of the voice. Voice spoken from the States, I am able to hear in this particular place. See, so the phone becomes the extension of voice. Next he says, the telescope and the microscope are the extension of our sight. Second, you find here the telescope. Okay, the telescope. Our friend and film actor recently, who is no more, late Sushant Singh, was mad after astronomy. So he had the best telescope, it seems, best telescope, I just read it, and he used to observe the stars and the movement of the planets and other things. And Jeorge Borges says here that telescope or microscope is the extension of our sight. You see, with my bare eyes I am not able to see the stars, but with the help of telescope I can see the stars even during daytime. So what does it mean? The telescope becomes the extension of my eyes. Third one he says, then he says the sword and the plow are the extension of our arms. Sword, you see, I can't cut it. So I got a sword, which means I can reach out. So, and when I cut something with the help of a sword, who has cut it? Well, sword is an instrument. It is me, my hand has cut it. So, sword becomes the extension of my hand. You see how beautifully Jeorge Borges explains. But he says, only the book is an extension of our imagination and memory. See, unlike telephone, telescope, or a sword, or a plow, he says, book is the extension of our imagination. Book is an extension of our memory. So, our story I write in the form of a book, extension of my imagination or my memory. Well, the history, which is in the form of books. So, my memory is stored in the form of a book. So, he says, book is the most astounding invention of man. Okay, all the others, telephone, remember, extension of human voice, telescope, extension of human sight, and sword, extension of our mind or extension of my hand, whereas book, it is the extension of our imagination and memory. Understand, this is also another important question. So very beautifully he explains about the books, and he is convinced that books will never disappear. Let's see, in the conclusion he would say something about this. Well, you state in a memorable passage that literature is a dream. So next concept he has asked is, well, you say that literature is a dream. Literature. Okay. So whether it is Kannada literature, Hindi literature or English literature, he says literature is a dream. And he says, yes, it is true. Literature is a dream, but a controlled dream. What do we mean by controlled dream? Controlled dream, meaning to say, dreams are not controllable. What do I mean? When we sleep, we get dreams. We are not able to control our dreams, that I should not get the dream. No, not possible. Dreams come. If at all you study further psychology, you will study Sigmund Freud, from whom we can say the explanation of dreams begin. He has written many books on that, how to explain or describe a particular dream. So in psychology we study that. Now a dream is not in my control. Sometimes you see night we get some terrific dreams, and as if we are falling from some height, or we are going in a vehicle which has got no brakes, or we are simply riding where there is no road, and some strange dreams you get. And they are not in our control. In fact, sometimes we suddenly get up and we are so much frightened. What happened? And we say, I had a terrific dream. I had a very bad dream. Now, Jeorge Borges says, literature is a controlled dream. What does he mean by that? He says, now, I believe that we owe literature almost everything we are and what we have been, and also what we will be. Our past is nothing but sequence of dreams. What difference can there be between dreaming and remembering the past? Books are the great memory of all centuries. Their function, therefore, is irreplaceable. Yeah, I would like to come back. Let's go back to that poem that we studied, which is that. You remember I told you about Keats, the poem that he wrote, when you are young, okay, when you are old. He tells his friend, his lover, that when you are old, take this book of poems and read it. Dream of the soft look that you had once. Think of the many souls that loved you, and think of me who genuinely loved you. He goes on describing when you are old, that poem. W.E. Keats. Okay. Now you see how beautiful it is that literature is a controlled dream. He says our past and everything is literature. Sometimes they say literature is a mirror held up to our life. Literature is a mirror held up to our life. What do we read in literature? Nothing but what is happening outside. You take any of the novels, you take the TV serials that we have got, what do we see there? Why people are behind those serials and all? Because what is happening in the society is portrayed there. Sometimes things may be exaggerated, where we find a person is born, then grows up, marries and dies, reborn, again marries, again dies, again reborn. Horrible serials we have got, especially the Hindi serials of so and so. I don't want to mention the name. They are sometimes we find meaningless. That's why they run, episodes run into thousands. Now whether it's possible. Anyhow, such things we need not worry. But otherwise we see, most of this, we can see some of the epic poems or some of the great literature is nothing but you can see the human life portrayed there. Human life, what happens in the society is found there. Only thing is that it is not a dream, he calls it as a controlled dream. Our past, our present and future is owed to literature. Okay, when I read a book, I try to shape my life according to the things that I find in the book. We have seen many of the youth, many of the children, by reading a book trying to imitate it. Because they want to form their life according to the literature. And sometimes I find my own story in the literature that I read. When I read it, I say, this looks like my own story. I have undergone this experience in my life. So any of the writers, for that matter, great writers, especially when they write a novel, most of the time the personal life is involved. Sometimes their own personal life, sometimes it is somebody else's. That's why we always see that the literature is nothing but it's my own life. And books are a memory for centuries. He already said it, book is the extension of human imagination and memory. Now books are a memory for centuries. We write and we keep it and it remains forever. It remains forever. Okay, let us remember that even what you have saved in computer one day can get deleted by itself. Virus can attack it, but books, if you can preserve them properly from the moth, then surely books are a treasure. So we have got even books belonging to very old centuries, things written in some leaves and all. We have found that. We have to remember that things written even on skin. We have found it. They are the books of those times. And further he says, their function therefore is irreplaceable. In other words, he says books cannot be replaced by something else. You see, the old telephone system today is replaced by a mobile. We have got satellite phones. Things are replaced and they are no more in place. We have got some old type of things, gramophone for example. Okay, today we have got CD player, even that is gone. We use or we listen today in pen drives. So their things are replaceable today, replaceable. But he says books cannot be replaced. They are irreplaceable. Books will always take the place of books. One book can take the place of another book. Nothing else or no other thing than book can replace a book. If books disappear, surely history would disappear. Look at the statement he says. What is that? If books disappear, the history would disappear. And if history disappears, where is my present? And if my present disappears, where is my future? In other words, books can never disappear. And he says, if books disappear, surely history would disappear and surely man would disappear. To put it positively, as long as man is there, history, books will be there. If history disappears, books disappear, man disappears, the world should end with that. But no, such a thing is not possible. He says, as long as man is there, there is going to be history. After all, what is literature? It is our own history. And what do we find in the books? It is our own history, our achievements, our inventions, our gifts. Everything is explained in literature, in books. So books will never disappear. That is what he says. So with this, we conclude this particular lesson or this interview by Robert Alifano of Jeorge Louis Borges. And what is the lesson for us to study? Is to give importance to books in our life. It can be any book. Let us remember, let us read the books written by different people, get inspired by them, and let us shape our life with the knowledge and wisdom that we find in different literature, different books. So I hope that not only our religious books, even the social or secular books that we find, the secular literature that we find in the society would be able to guide and shape our life. Thank you very much.